I'd like to welcome everybody. This is our virtual open house public information session for the former Kerr-McGee refinery in Cushing, Oklahoma. We're going to give folks an update on the newest information on the site. So some of you are joining from your computers at home or from your smartphone. So we welcome you all. So go ahead and get started here. So my name is Todd Downham. I work for the Department of Environmental Quality. We're located in Oklahoma City, and I am the project manager for the former Kerr-McGee refinery site in Cushing. So the topics for today, I'm going to introduce the project team. We're going to talk about some of our goals for this virtual open house today. I'm going to discuss some site history and ownership, some of the past cleanup actions and ongoing cleanup actions. And we're going to get into some of the details on what this upcoming work will entail. And at the end, we'll have a chance to answer some questions if you all have those, and some information on how to contact me if you would rather reach out to me through email or by phone. Okay, so for the Cushing site, the Department of Environmental Quality, the MultiState Environmental Trust, and then the contractors, Burns & McDonald and Jacobs. This composes the main members of the Cushing team. There are some subcontractors, but these are the main three. So, okay, so the goals today are to provide some information about the site. And as I said, there'll be an opportunity at the end to ask questions and have those answered, and information on how to get a hold of us if you need to do that. So here's an old aerial photo, a historical photo of the refinery. I'm not sure the date on this, but it's obviously before any cleanup work was done at the site. So beginning back in the teens, the site was originally a tank farm, and from the teens into the mid 50s, the site had multiple owners, and then in 56, Kerr-McGee acquired the property and began its ownership that lasted until the early 70s. Once the Superfund law passed in the early 80s, Kerr-McGee notified the EPA of that there were some issues at the site. And then in the late 80s, the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, was involved in the site and determined that there was an issue with some radioactive material that needed to be addressed. In 1990, the Kerr-McGee Corporation signed a consent order with the Department of Environmental Quality, which was the Department of Health at that time. This predated the DEQ's existence. And that was an agreement with Kerr-McGee and the state to take some action on the site. And various cleanup actions took place between 1990 and 2005, 2006. Kerr-McGee still owned the site. And then in 2006, Kerr-McGee transferred the ownership to the Tronox company. And then following the economy issues and the burden put on Tronox for the environmental liabilities, they weren't able to manage those, and so they went bankrupt. And at that point, the site ownership transferred to the MultiState Trust, and the portions owned by Tronox were now managed by the MultiState Trust. So the MultiState Trust, Greenfield Environmental MultiState Trust, it was established as a 2011 Tronox bankruptcy settlement, where they settled with the federal government. And the MultiState Trust exists solely for the benefit of the state of Oklahoma, and it acts as a fiduciary for the state of Oklahoma. And it's not motivated by profit or gain. Its sole mission is to protect the human health and the environment on the site. And they do answer to the state. So the MultiState Trust does own the property, and they are in charge of facilitating cleanup and managing the site, not just in Oklahoma, but in many other states, 31 states. And so they're charged with implementing the investigation and then the cleanup. And then DEQ does oversight to make sure that all those actions are being performed to states and state and federal regulation and requirements. So the lead agency is the DEQ on the site. DEQ approves all the cleanup plans, activities, and the budgets for each year. If they make a recommendation on who to hire, we would review that and approve that as needed. And then once cleanup actions are finished on the site, we make sure that those actions were completed to our satisfaction. And as I mentioned, the beneficiaries are DEQ and also EPA. The DEQ can consult EPA if they need to, but the DEQ is the lead agency on the site. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the history here. So back in 1990, the consent order was signed between DEQ and the state of Oklahoma. And the Nuclear Regulatory Agency Commission determined that there was radiological material on the sites. And they did work on the site to address that radioactive material that lasted until 2005. So they did quite an extensive sampling event and cleanup event that addressed the radioactive material on the site. So the site was divided up into two main components. There was the radiological component and then the non-radiological component. So the radiological component was cleaned up under the NRC, and then the non-radiological component was divided up into two different phases, phase 1 and phase 2. The phase 1 targeted the most imminent threats that existed on the site outside of the radiological issues. Those were to address the large acidic hydrocarbon waste material on the site, and those were in 5 different waste pits. If anybody is familiar with the Cushing site and from the area, you might recall the work that was performed. It was quite extensive. And now we're into phase 2, which was to address the remaining waste pits that are on the site. and remaining contaminated soil, and also to address contaminated groundwater. Because the site is fairly complex, we separated phase 2 into 2 components. The first component is to address the waste pits, contaminated soil, and then the second component, which we're still in the process of designing, is to address contaminated groundwater on the site. So just to get into a little more detail on the phase 1 work. So it lasted from 1996 till 2002, and those actions involved the removing of the acidic waste material that was in several locations on the site. So pits 1, 2, 3, which is on the northwest portion of the site, the former pit 4 area, which is due east, in the northeast part of the site, and then the pit 5 location, which is located more in the southern central portion of the site. So these were very large areas that were cleaned up. They posed they were the biggest and the nastiest stuff out there that needed to be addressed quickly. And so it was disposed of on site into 2 different disposal cells, the north disposal cell and the south disposal cell. The other media that was addressed in the phase 1 was the surface water on the site, which was contaminated. So Skull Creek runs through the site, and the groundwater moves towards the direction of Skull Creek, and we were seeing contamination in the creek. And so various interim measures were put in place, French drain type of systems that would capture that acidic and contaminated groundwater before it entered into the creek. Those designs for the groundwater were designed as interim, or not permanent, but a temporary solution, and they have proved to be quite successful at maintaining Skull Creek from the impacts that it had received in the past. And so these interim measures are ongoing and 365 days a year, and we treat about 5 to 8 million gallons of water per year. So it's been quite a success, but keep in mind these interim measures were only designed or engineered to be a temporary solution to protect the creek. So I'll come back to that in further slides. So here we have a map that shows the areas, the main areas that we're talking about during this session today. So the addressing of the contaminated soil and waste material is documented in a decision document that was finalized in 2007. Actually, it was completed in 2018. In 2017, we selected what we thought was the best remedy for the site. And then starting in, well, this month, activities will begin on the site. And the plan is to address quite a large amount of material, approximately 150,000 cubic yards of material. So that's the main topic for today is related to that. I have and I will touch on some of the other actions from the past and what we plan on doing in the future. Now, groundwater is going to be separate from this upcoming action. We had a public meeting in Cushing, and where we discussed the proposed cleanup for waste material and soil, and also for groundwater. We had two public meetings that we had a proposed plan that was open for public comment, and those comments were documented and addressed in two different decision documents, one for soil and waste and one for groundwater. And for groundwater, as I mentioned, the temporary measures are still in place and ongoing. A component of the future groundwater remedy will be to revamp those, re-engineer those temporary systems that are in place so that they are much more robust and efficient, but doesn't require so much manpower. And we're going to implement some automated components to it. And in areas where, in some of the more complex areas where we can't address, where we don't have a real defined waste pit to excavate, what we'll do is go in and stabilize that material with like a Portland cement type material to treat that material in place, and to also stabilize it so it sets up and becomes a solid mass, so that it no longer becomes a source for contamination that could leach out of that material into the groundwater. So the goal in this phase 2 work for the waste pits and for the groundwater is to remove the sources that are contributing to contamination on the site, and that also may contribute to the groundwater on the site. And so we're still working through some of the groundwater designs, and that is on schedule to be completed next year. And the actual work won't be until after that, but we'll have the design completed next year. So the reason why we're doing this additional work at the site is because, as I said, the early actions were an interim. We addressed the most contaminated material first. Those were placed into the 2 on-site disposal cells, and then the creek was protected from contamination. But the remaining waste pits, even though you don't see them, they're not very visible. You can walk across a field out there and you wouldn't even know it, but they're still there, and they still may pose a health risk to humans or to the surrounding environment or to the groundwater. So the plan is to go in and address those so that the risk is removed. And so the ultimate goals to prevent for human health is to prevent exposure to contamination, whether it's in the soil or with its waste material. We want to make sure we remove that. And then we also want to make sure it's removed so it doesn't, as I said, so it's not contributing to the groundwater or to Skull Creek. Also, there's a asbestos component. We have some buried asbestos that we plan on removing as well, and that will be done in compliance with the standards for that, the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants, NESHAP, and the Oklahoma Department of Labor rules. That material has to be handled in a special way, so those separate rules would apply to that part of this project. And then, so in the big scope of things is we want to always clean up these areas on these sites so they can be reused and turned back into an industrial reuse. Some areas on the site, that's not practical or possible, such as where the disposal cells are located. But the goal is to, if we can, put the site back into some type of reuse that would benefit the local economy. So when we were going through and trying to make decisions on which alternative, what was the best solution to address this material, we looked at different decision-making criteria. So obviously the first was the overall protection of human health and the environment. And then also it would have to comply with the federal and the state standards. So we looked at all of our options. We looked at various different possibilities, and we came up with one that we thought was the best one. And that was presented at the public meeting in September of 2016. There was a public comment period that lasted for 30 days following that, where folks could read the proposed plan and they could make comments. We received those comments and we incorporated those comments in the final decision document, which was signed in August of 2017. So the goal of the alternative that we did choose was to excavate, basically, dig up this material on the site and the asbestos material. And those areas would be hauled off. The material would be hauled off in trucks and disposed of at an approved landfill location. It was not located on the site. It's an off-site landfill. And these excavation areas would then be filled with clean soil and then revegetated so that it's back to the original grade. And we have testing methods where we make sure that the clean soil that we do bring in is clean and we're not bringing contaminated material back into the site. Another component of the selected remedy is to put a final cap over the south disposal cell. So right now it just has a temporary cap because we weren't for sure if we were going to need to put more material in that or not. Since we decided that excavated material was going to be disposed of off-site, that south disposal cell will be capped permanently so that it will be protected from water infiltrating down. It will be engineered so that we don't ever see any erosion or damage to the cap. And then with a site like this, it's cleaned up to industrial standards. We have certain land use controls that are implemented, deed notices that will prevent things like residential housing from going onto the site. That would not be appropriate reuse for the site. The site's cleaned up for an industrial reuse. And so the institutional controls, the deed notices on the property will prevent future inappropriate development of the site. Inspections will definitely be a part of the site moving forward into the future. Since we do have those disposal cells on site, we want to make sure that that they're still functioning as designed and we don't have impacts to the groundwater. So we have a system of monitoring wells installed around each one of those disposal cells that we would sample and monitor on a scheduled basis to make sure that the groundwater is not impacted from those. So coming up next as you'll see here, starting this month and then really kicking off this December and on into the winter, the MultiState Trust contractor Jacobs is going to be implementing the remedy. You'll start to see trucks and a lot more activity really starting in December. There'll be some site work going on until then, but we'll really get going in December. And then as I mentioned before, the water treatment, the interim water managing actions that are ongoing at the site will still be maintained by the site's contractor, Burns & McDonnell. They maintain a constant presence on the site, and they do a good job of capturing that groundwater and then treating it, and it's treated and then discharged into the creek after it's treated, after it's sampled to make sure that it's safe to do so, and then released back into Skull Creek. And as we move forward, the trust and DEQ are going to be working with the city and Cushing to communicate in the best way we can about the upcoming work. We understand that on a certain level there's going to be some inconveniences and possibly some odors at certain times, and so we'll work with the community to manage those appropriately so that no one is too inconvenienced by the work that we do. So starting in December, you'll start to see a lot more personnel and large, what we call yellow iron, the big equipment, excavators, haul trucks, that type of thing. And the majority of the work is going to be confined to the north and south of Deep Rock Road and west of Linwood Avenue. Also, there's a historical building on site which has been heavily damaged in the past due to earthquakes, and so it's structurally it's not sound and not safe to remain in place. So the plan is to demolish that on this, and that's indicated. The location is indicated by the yellow arrow on the map. If you can see my mouse pointer, I'm just circling the area in the center of the site. And then the areas in green are the waste pits that will be excavated beginning in December. And one of these waste pits is located near the intersection of Linwood and Deep Rock. It actually extends northward a little bit, and we do expect that to affect traffic flow at some point. So we will do our best to manage that situation and make sure it's not inconveniencing folks too badly, but it is a reality when we're doing this type of work that there'll be equipment coming and going through that area, and so when it's not a safe area to be present at, we will, there'll be some restrictions in traffic flow through this area. So the waste material will be loaded onto trucks. These are pretty big trucks, 20 to 40 cubic yard dump trucks. And they'll have covers on the back. They will not be traveling through the main part of Cushing. And one of the goals is to keep the level of disruption to a minimum. So they'll be taking a route that bypasses the most populated areas of Cushing or Cushing vicinity. You're going to travel west Highway 18 and then north on, I believe that's Little Avenue, and then to the disposal facility. And the trust contractor Jacobs is working to develop a traffic control plan, and those plans would be approved by DOT approved and in Payne County. So we will be working on those to get those finalized, so that we want to maintain a safe and effective process through all of this. There are quite a few supporting documents that are open for public review, and they are on the DEQ website. And if you're looking at your computer screen at home, you can see this website. Some of those reports are the investigations that we were performed before we make any decisions. We had to do quite extensive investigation that took many years to complete, and so that's on there for you to review, as well as the different decision documents for waste and soil, and also the groundwater decision document. We also have various, the latest fact sheet is up on that website, and various other things. You're more than welcome to take a look at that stuff. They're also located in the public library in Cushing at 215 North Steele Avenue. I believe all those documents are either on a flash drive or on a CD in the library. Don't know if they have too many paper copies laying around these days. But if anybody has any difficulty reading those documents, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I can help you navigate that. So if you're listening on your phone at home, the website is https://go.usa.gov/XPS2M. And if you didn't get all that, my contact information will be at the end of this presentation. You're more than welcome to call me or send me an email. If you have any questions about any of the things we discussed, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. So this presentation is being recorded today, and the PowerPoint will be able to be viewed at the website at the top of your screen. So my email address is todd.downham@deq.ok.gov. So it's my name, todd.downham@deq.ok.gov.